Gotta clear my throat here and get my voice right. Not sure if this is coronavirus or just a cannabis cough. I guess either's possible, so just stay away from me, fuckers. Keep your distance. That's basically where we're all at this point. And with that, we're going to get into something that brings people a little closer together. And that is the Secretive Service shout out from the KiLLs podcast. And this week goes out to Chad Johnson, Stage 3 dog trainer for Retrieving Freedom, Inc. He is Army veteran and service dog recipient from Retrieving Freedom, Inc., RFI. Always goes above and is beyond his job requirements to ensure his veterans and autism families that reach out to RFI are well taken care of and have everything they need to become successful teams in public and at home. He really cares about the lives he changes and is just an all-around great guy. Also, is a new recipient of a Project Dust-Off bow, which Project Dust-Off, Tyson Trunkhill, the man who sent this in and sent a Secretive Service shout out before. Project Dust-Off, awesome. What they do, they take old bows, equipment donated, not just old, some of it's brand new equipment that's donated. But Tyson is a master when it comes to tuning a bow, and he takes all these donated pieces and he puts them together and builds a good bow, properly tuned, and gives them to veterans that are coming back. So he's taking the old equipment and dusting them off and bringing these veterans back in and dusting them off and helping them reacclimate back into society. And I myself can say that I find archery to be very therapeutic and almost zen-like. And I think it's a good training tool. I think it's a good mental tool, and a lot of these guys like to hunt and get the adrenaline. So big supporter of Project Dust-Off as well as Retrieving Freedom. And thank you, Tyson Trunkhill. And again, thank you, Chad Johnson, Stage 3 dog trainer and Army veteran. Big shout out to you. Really appreciate what all you guys are doing, and keep it up. This episode of the KiLLs podcast got a buddy of mine whose podcast I've been on before, Truth from the Stand, Clint Campbell. He is actually inspired this podcast unknowingly. I had so much fun doing his podcast, and then just some of the things from other podcasts he's done stuck with me and kind of formulated a little bit of what I wanted KiLLs it to be. And part of what I mean by that is I don't want KiLLs it to just be a hunting podcast. I wanted it to be more a podcast that is focused on men and women that kill it at their craft, whatever it be. And I find Clint to be a very interesting dude. He's got his hands into a lot of different things. He's got unique perspectives on things, and he's a guy I just like to talk to in general, not just shoot the shit about hunting with, but just really enjoyed our conversation and pretty much every time we talk. I guess I should say that this was recorded on March 25th. The reason that may be relevant, we do talk about this coronavirus and some of what's going on. So some of what we said has changed a lot. I mean, this pandemic, as we discuss, is, and to use his reference, amoeba-like. It's forever changing. We can't quite define the hard edges and figure out quite what's going on. It's an ever-changing epidemic. And so some of the things we may say, if we mention numbers or something like that, they are probably changed a lot. So it's old information. So that's podcast land. That's how it goes, fuckers. That's why I'm just giving you the little disclosure. Anyway, I know a lot of you are bored. That's why you're actually taking time to listen to my podcast. Because if you had something better to do, you probably would be. Something else cool you could do? Check out Carbon TV. Shit's free. Don't even got to put in an email. Shit's free. Just look it up. And while you're on there, check out Time's Up Outdoors. If that sounds familiar, that's because I had my buddy Scott Zig on from the Detroit Fire Department and Time's Up Outdoors team on episode 5 of the KiLLs podcast, which was actually a really cool dynamic video cast where we got to hit the boom button a lot and show some cool shit of him fighting fires and everything else. Want to watch more fighting fires and more killing shit? Time's Up Outdoors. Right now on Carbon TV, their episode From Doe to Snow is ranked number 8. So please jump on social media, Instagram, whatever. Look up at Time's Up Outdoors. You'll see a little bracket there that they showed of Carbon TV. Just jump on there, and all you got to do is comment at Time's Up Outdoors. Help some badass firefighters and just kick-ass Americans that are out there risking their lives and safety right now. And that is no bullshit. Right now, more than ever. Do them a favor and give them a vote. It's pretty much that simple. Easy way to give back and show some appreciation. Again, thank you to Chad Johnson, Secretive Service shout out. Thank you for your services. With that, I ain't gonna quarantine or keep any longer.
You were born primal. You were born primal.
What the fuck's up, y'all? Modern Assassin. Firing off from the farm here in the Free State. Just below that line they call the Mason-Dixon. Talking to a buddy right up above it. And we're coming at you with the truth. Truth from the stand. My buddy, Clint Campbell. Been on his podcast before. It was a lot of fun, and I expect this one to be the same. Get ready for another episode. KiLLs it. Quarantine. I'm stuck down here. He's stuck up there. We're keeping our social distance. So I got my buddy on the phone. What is up, Clint?
What's going on, brother, man? Thanks for having me on, dude. We are quarantined. No joke, man. I wish it was joking, but
yeah, right.
I'm going on day. I don't even know. I think this is day 11 for me in solitude. I feel like I'm in the hole maybe in Shawshank Redemption. I was Andy Dufresne. I didn't do the taxes right, so they threw me in the hole.
Well, hopefully you don't have to crawl through a mile of shit to get out of this. You might get something worse than the coronavirus.
Right, dude. If that's all it took was crawling through a mile of shit to make this stuff stop, you could sign me up tomorrow. I would take one for the collective team for that.
I'm with you. I'll be behind you or lead the way, whatever it takes. And I told you a second before we started the podcast, I had to get a glass of water filled up. That's to stay hydrated, stay healthy, but I also had to top off my Tito's here just to stay sane.
There you go.
Maryland just put us in the closed non-essential businesses and shit, mm-hmm. And I don't think there's a fucking thing different. See, everyone I know is still working. There's just as many people out everywhere. Traffic's just as fucking bad. I've got everything I needed as far as supplies in advance of this.
Yeah.
Here's my thing. If you know something's coming, get prepared. If nothing happens, people laugh and they say, I told you so. Yeah. But if something does happen, you're not fucked, which the people that did not prepare may be.
And they don't want to be your best. They all want to be your best friend then too.
Exactly. And, and that's another thing. A lot of them are being really rude and ignorant and shit online about it. And it's like, man, if you're so stubborn and hard-headed and you know everything that's going on and so opinionated this, what if you're wrong?
Right.
I kind of equate it to being on the water. If you are out on a boat in the water, fucking be nice to all the other boats, because you never know when, and help everyone you can, because you never know when you're going to need help. And
Right.
if you need help out there, it might be a dangerous situation. Just like this, like we're talking about, you know, if you're reaching out for help, it could be a desperate situation. And that's when, I don't know, just as much as the virus is actually starting to kill a younger group of people and a bigger demographic and really spreading, I'm worried about the people on people more than anything.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm definitely probably. I don't want to downplay like the health aspect of it necessarily, you know, because I mean it doesn't deserve to be downplayed. I think it's serious enough to warrant, you know, it's a significant problem. But I kind of agree with you where, you know, we live in a, you know, a society that's used to and has grown used to being able to be super connected, super free. We're a very mobile society. Whenever you look at us, like versus other cultures and stuff like that, we don't stay in one place very often for a very long time. We like to be able to go out and do our things and, you know, be with people and be social creatures and stuff like that. And this is a really big departure for most everybody. I was kind of joking with some friends at work before we all got the nod, you know, whatever it was. For us, we started before we got the non-essential businesses, you know, order to close. We had already, you know, my business or the company I work for, we had already gone to work from home status, like, because we can all work remotely and stuff like that. So just like, you know what, this is going to happen. So why don't we just go ahead and make this happen now? That way we can kind of test all our technology and make sure we could all stay connected and keep everything kind of working as usual without having to be, you know, in the office. And I was joking. I was like, I'm kind of an introvert. I was like, I've been, you know, prepping for this all my life. I was like,
right.
I was like, you know, socially distant for me is like, you know, what I ask for my birthday every year. You know, it's like, you know, the wife and kid will ask me, what do you want for your birthday? I'm like, to be completely left alone for 24 hours would be great.
I don't know if you ever heard of this dude, Chris Webby. He's a rapper from in the Northeast somewhere, but he put out a line about the quarantine. He put out a song about the quarantine, and he's like, one of the lines says something like, I've been like this since before a pandemic. It's just the same shit,
Right.
just a little more disinfectant. It's like, yeah, you know, like for a lot of us, I don't fucking go out a lot. I'm home anyway. I'm doing my own shit. I'm working on something. And if I'm not, when I am out, I'm social distancing. I'm trying to get the fuck away from people and find critters for the most part. So yeah, this hasn't impacted me a whole lot, but you know, like you were saying, we're used to being such a mobile society that most people, I mean, a lot of people, all 3 meals a day, every day, are eating out.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And now they, you know, they have a couple snacks, but they're not even really prepared for daily meals, let alone for daily meals for a week, 2, maybe more.
Yeah, that and just going out and getting the supplies and stuff that you need, like for this. I mean, we're pretty lucky around here to where it's like we've not seen the crazy like shortage of anything or, you know, anything like that for whatever reason. You know, we prepped a little bit early. My wife and I actually talked about it, you know, maybe 2 weeks before things got real, I guess I would say.
Yeah.
And we just were kind of talking about it because she actually walked into the grocery store the one day and she was like, you know, there's a bunch of stuff that's missing. She was like, you know, what's going on? And I was like, yeah. I was like, well, and I was just kind of keeping tabs on like the news and stuff like that. Not that I watch news, but I was looking online just to kind of keep, you know, an eye on what's happening. And I was like, yeah, I was like, it feels like something's going to happen, get real, you know, whatever the case is, don't know what it looks like. I was like, we should probably just go grab whatever our essentials are for like a 2-week period of time in case we get sick and we have to stay in or whatever. And so we're good to go. So we just went and got that and stashed it. And we still go to the grocery store. Like she just went today, you know what I mean? Like we usually go like every Friday, but I figure typically people are going to go on Fridays. So we decided to start to go in the middle of the week just to kind of avoid other people being there.
Try to avoid the crowd and hopefully get supplies because it sells out pretty quick.
Yeah. So that's what we started doing. And we've not had a problem, you know, getting anything that we've wanted. And I think, you know, which is good. Which means I think we live around some folks who are probably, what I'll say is somewhat reasonable. You know, they're kind of like looking at it going like, look, if we don't all run out and buy 100 of the same thing all at once, like we'll probably be pretty good.
Yeah, if
So,
we don't all start hoarding shit, there's enough to go around.
yeah, exactly.
You know?
So yeah, it's but I mean, look, I don't want to downplay it. It's a bad deal all the way around. I just hope that something gets figured out, to where it's not a situation where we're in a precarious kind of place for the next 6, 12 to 18 months. I'm hoping that it's something that we can weather and figure out, and we'll have a couple months worth of disruption and get back to living.
One good thing is the growing season isn't too far off.
Right.
And I think this is going to be, I sure as fuck hope it is, put it that way. I hope and I think this is going to be a wake-up call to a lot of people when the necessity, not just an option, but view it as a necessity to be at least somewhat self-sustained. And here's the thing: if everyone, there's not how it is. There's not enough for every single person to go out and start hunting. There's not enough for every single person to go out and start fishing. But everyone does have a porch or a windowsill or something where they can plant some herbs or grow some tomatoes or grow some peppers. Start a little garden out back. Maybe have a couple chickens. And here's the thing: you don't need to have a whole farmstead. You grow tomatoes, your neighbor's growing peppers, and your neighbor's a fisherman. You can start taking care of each other. And each person, at least if everyone did a little something to be self-sufficient, I think it would just go so far. As much as they're trying to social distance us, which it makes sense. I'm not arguing or saying any bullshit behind it. I think you're going to see a lot of coming together. Maybe not necessarily physically, but with people coming together, helping hand. 9/11.
Yeah.
Everyone was a New Yorker and an American at that point, and here with this, everyone is an American that could potentially be sick, or know someone that is.
Yeah, I think the downside, or not the downside, I think the hard part with that, I think the reason why we're not seeing quite as much of that right now is because it's not like the 9/11 was shock and awe, right? Like you couldn't fathom seeing those buildings drop, right? And those planes hit those buildings. And it was like in an instant, there were thousands of people dead.
Exactly. This could be thousands over months.
Right. And so you don't have the same
shock and awe.
Yeah. Right. The lens is different because it's a buildup, right? And so people are still, like you said, there's plenty of people who are still functioning about their day to day that hasn't felt like it's changed a whole lot. So why am I concerned? And why would I be any more concerned with helping my neighbor than I was before if I don't feel like anything has changed? And so I think that's the hardest part. And I think that's the hardest part that, health officials and whatever are having a hard time kind of disseminating the information, because I feel like for a lot, I feel like it's falling on deaf ears. And I'm not saying you need to buy everything hook, line, and sinker, because I feel like some information they're putting out is not necessarily always 100% accurate, and it's not a fault of theirs. It's a fault of like the data is wrong, because like it's something that is happening and it's fluid and it's happening in real time. So you're never going to be correct. You know what I mean? Like that's just like the reality of it. And I think where people get frustrated is they're looking for concrete answers, and they don't deal well. Like the human mind just doesn't deal well without structure, right? It's like our brain, I'm going to get into like some weird psychology stuff from like my psych classes and stuff, but the brain builds a catalog, right? And it's like, I think it's referred to as a schema, and it's basically a filing system that you use. And that's how your brain makes sense of everything. That's why whenever you see a picture, it recalls something right away for you, because it makes a connection, right? And so for something like this, like a pandemic that doesn't have like defined edges, right? It's kind of an amoeba, right? It's always kind of moving and shifting. And so it's hard for us to kind of understand like what is happening, because we're looking for definitive answers, definitive concrete things that we can go, okay, I can make sense of this, right? And now I know how to react. That's kind of what 9/11 had. It was like a lot of people died in an instant, as horrible as it is, my mind can make sense of that because I can quantify and understand 3,000 people, 5,000 people. I can get that, right? But the moving target of how many are sick versus how many are hospitalized versus how many are in ICU versus what the mortality rate is versus the entire population of the U.S. versus comparison to Italy, which has a third of the population. So there's no real.
And like you said, that's constantly changing. As soon as you have that data and you can formulate something from it, that's old news.
Yeah. And so I think people really struggle with that because it's like you're looking for something that you can go, I understand this. And then once you understand it, you can start to make a plan to like work around it or whatever. But if you don't understand it and you can't wrap your mind around what it is or why it is you need to do something, it becomes really hard to kind of follow that those instructions or that particular process because you don't know what you're doing it for. You're just following blindly.
I can speak directly and attest to that, to something I saw just 2 days ago. Whatever. I'll just say it. I don't give a fuck. I have to remind myself that I'm not as dumbed down as the general population. Okay. Mm-hmm. Like I if you want to call me an asshole because I consider myself above average, whatever. But I was looking and I don't want to say which news station it was, but it was a big one. If I said the name, you would know it. Everyone would know it. That's why I even looked at this when I saw it pop up, and it was 5 myths of the coronavirus versus facts. Yep. And one of the myths said that my domestic pet can get the coronavirus or transmit the coronavirus. And the fact said, and this was from the CDC, fact, there is zero evidence to support that the coronavirus, COVID-19 virus, originated from a U.S. domestic animal.
Right.
That's great. Except that does not answer the fucking question at all. The myth is that your pet can get it or transmit it. And what they use from the CDC for an answer is there's no 0% evidence to support it originated. So yes, your pet can get it. Your pet can transmit it. It is possible because they can have it on them and transmit it. But they lie to the general public with this feel-good answer. Oh, thank God Fluffy can't get it. Okay. Well, no, yeah, he fucking can. They just lied to you in a fancy way and pulled the blind down on you a little bit further. And I literally started making a Facebook post, rant about this. And I'm like, whatever. I'm not even wasting my fucking breath. If it helps somebody feel better, fuck it. Why am I... am I doing more harm than I am good by pointing this out at this point?
Right. And that's kind of where I've landed, like my whole takeaway from all this, like I don't get too mixed up in, what the, news stations are saying and stuff like that. Cause I don't particularly feel that they, I don't feel like they're journalists any longer. They're looking for clickbait and material and stuff like that.
Like you said, shock and awe.
Yeah, I work in marketing and advertising. I get the game, right? It's why you can look at, just for example, you can look at the BBC as an example, and I'll just put it out there. Like the BBC is typically where I go if I'm actually looking to find real news. They don't have a dog in the fight in the U.S. and they don't care. They're not interested in anything other than kind of reporting the event. You can look at just pick a news station, doesn't matter which one it is in the U.S., and you look at the two stories side by side, and you would swear to God that they were completely different events.
Absolutely. From the perspective they're written on. And the audience they're targeting to provoke.
Right, exactly. And so, like, with that, it's like my biggest, I think, obviously there's a problem, like I said before, like with the health pandemic and stuff like that. But my biggest kind of issue with everything that's kind of going on is I feel like because in the U.S., our media, especially our news outlets, have gotten so far away from having like any real journalistic integrity that they're doing more harm than good during the course of this whole situation. And that if nothing else comes out of this, I feel like there needs to be not a restriction of speech because, I'm a big First Amendment fan, but I think there has to be some type of, I don't want to say oversight, but that might be the right word, that kind of holds these media outlets accountable for the things that they say if you can read it and like as a layperson without like all the background of being involved in it, I can go, this is not true.
Well,
you know what I mean?
they've gone from from educating the public with information and news to, I mean, they're a business, and sensationalism sells. So everything is, giant and misleading and is a pandemic, an epidemic. And now we're in one and no one's paying attention because they make everything into an epidemic. But so, it's like, how do we, I mean, I get news is a business and whatever, but how do we get, I was kind of even thinking as you were saying this, like, well, do we have a government run news station that's not making money? Yeah, that sounds great. And
hello.
And non-programming. Like it's like, how do you do that? The only way I think that's going to happen is individualism. You're going to have to have, guys, which there are several of them, journalists and groups that put out what they consider non-bipartisan or biased and are actual journalists. But we're just so flooded with information constantly. That's why no one knows what to do right now. And the thing is, like, everything is changing so fast that, I mean, it's the fucking Boy Scout model. Try to be prepared. I mean, you don't know what's going to happen, so just simply put, try to be prepared.
Yep, that's about it, man. That's all you can do. But hopefully we'll turn the corner, and hopefully there'll be some lessons learned. I will say the silver lining though in all this is, like, always try to find, something that's worth a shit to come out of it. And for me, it's like I'm getting to spend more time with my wife and my daughter than I have in the past, like, I don't know how long, because we're all at home together. My wife's working from home, I'm working from home, and my daughter, of course, school is closed. They haven't definitively closed it for the whole year, but that's probably going to happen. And so we're eating dinner together every night. We're playing, basketball in the afternoons. We're taking walks together. We're, playing fetch with the dog, playing card games. And it's just all those things that you kind of overlook whenever you're living normal life, and this is forcing you to stop and have, and spend time with your family and stuff like that. And so that to me is like the one positive, unintended consequence out of all this is that, I'm getting some quality time with my girls that I wouldn't otherwise get. And that'll come in handy hopefully when November rolls around and we're hopefully through this stuff and I can take my trips.
Right.
Because I've already put my time in.
It's like, I won't go too deep into it because I said open the last podcast with this, that I feel like this virus is a worldwide epidemic of careful what you wish for. I wish I had more time to sit at home with my wife and kids. Well, now you do, and you are making the most of it. You are making the best of it. You are, a lot of people, they're just sitting on their couch bitching and looking at social media, and it's like, man, it's that catch-22. Be careful what you wish for. You have some time. Make something positive of it. And you're right. I think a lot of people will. A buddy of mine, he works a lot. He has to take care of his mother, his son. Well, now that he's not working every day with his job, he is still essential personnel and has a job to do. He's getting to paint again more than he did before. And it was that thing, man, I just wish I had, if I just had a couple more hours in the day, I'd really like to be painting again. And now he is. And it's I think you're going to see a lot of pandemic art. It gives us the chance to finally get on the phone together and record an episode of KiLLs It.
I know, right? Well, I think the one thing you said earlier about, I think you were saying, I forget how you said it, but just like people having more time and things of that nature. I think it's a time to like look and see, like things are changing and you're forced into this change. And so like, it's a great opportunity to like, if you have a growth mindset of like, how do you want to grow? Right? Like this is a great opportunity to reset, whether it's like hobbies, whether it's career or whatever, because you're being forced to take a hard look at things and being provided the time and opportunity to do so. And so it's a good time to like say, like, what is it about myself I'd like to work on? Like maybe like for me, I'm like, man, I'd like to read some more, right? So I'm trying to read more because I have
One
a
of
little
the
bit more
things
free
I
time.
mentioned in the maybe you want to read a book. Now you have time,
Right.
you know?
That it's like if you look at the stock market just in general, I'm not a financial analyst guy, but like, for older folks, this sucks, especially if they were close to retirement age, right? Because they just lost a lot of money. Like I don't even want to look at mine. I refuse to look at it. I'm not even close to retiring, but for someone who's younger, like, man, this would be a really good time to start putting money into like an IRA, a 401k, or whatever the case is, because you will probably never I would say it'd be really hard in your lifetime to maybe buy lower than you'd be able to buy right now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so anything you put in right now is going to work that much harder for you because the market resets like this every so often, right? Like maybe not quite this hard, but you know what I mean? You have like, down quarters, down year, or whatever the case is, or you fall into a bear market like we're probably going to enter into.
Yeah, cyclic.
But it always, like, if you look over the course of the market's history or whatever, like these valleys and mountaintops happen. And if we can catch if you're at the right age, we can catch one of them in like one of the deep valleys and you're young enough to do so. It's like, man, you can really set yourself up, you know what I mean, in a good place when you get older by being smart about what you do, because right now you can buy super cheap, And so for me, it's like, I'm trying to think about like, what extra do I have that I'd be willing to throw down to be able to like give myself a boost in like 5 years when things roar back, you know what I mean? And so those are the things that like I'm thinking about of like opportunities as opposed to looking at it going like everything sucks. It's like, yeah, it does, but it's a much better place to be to look at it and go like, okay, with all this sucky stuff happening, where can I win?
Exactly.
Like where are the winning opportunities?
Yeah, where can you pull something positive from this? A friend of mine, she said the other day, she's like, do you think things are ever going to go back the way they were? And my response was, I hope not.
Right, yeah.
And not because I'm hoping this is like a terrible down collapse catastrophe. I'm hoping that people view this as, this is why we need to be prepared. This is why we need to be somewhat self-reliant. This is why we need to be nice to each other. This is why we can't just think we're going to have everything at a push of a button. This is the reason we need informative news, as you just went through. Like, I'm hoping that this is a wake-up call for, not only individuals, but as a nation, like of what can happen at any time. I mean, this is, suppose it wasn't a virus that came from China. Suppose it was a rock that fell out of the sky and hit the middle of the fucking country. That can come without warning at any fucking time.
Yeah.
I mean, you just never know.
Like Mike Tyson says, like everyone's got a plan to get punched in the face.
Right.
So what's your plan?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, I mean, it's the same way too, man.
If it's to just cover up, you're just going to get pounded.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's the same way, not to make light of it, in hunting terms, but it's the same way when you're hunting, especially when you're doing travel trips and stuff like that. It's like you walk into places, especially if you're out of state and you've got a plan, and you think you have a plan, maybe you scouted it before and you get there, and whenever you get there, it's like, it doesn't look like anything like that you thought it was going to look like. And so now you're like, all right, the plan I had is no good anymore. Now what do I do?
Yeah.
I'm here for 5 days or 7 days or whatever. And now I got to try to make something happen. And, and my plan's out the window. It's like, well, if you paid attention and you're self-reliant, you go, okay, well, what do I know?
You're prepared to adapt, whether you're taking the hunt, maybe you got to stand, maybe you're also looking, I could go with the ground approach. Maybe, you got to have them options to be prepared to meet your situation.
Right. And it's not just what do you have, it's what do you have and what can I gain along the way? Right. Because that's the same thing, even like in the situation that we're in from a pandemic perspective. It's like, you're not going to wake up one day and it's just going to be back. It's going to be right again. Right.
Yes.
There's going to be building blocks for that. Right. And it's the same thing whenever you're doing an out of state hunt and you're on a piece you're not familiar with. It's like, okay, I don't know shit today, but I'm going to scout and then I'm going to set up, I'm going to hunt somewhere whenever I find some hot sign. And I'm going to ask the questions why I found that sign, where I found it, and what did I learn during the course of that day that I can use them the next day to help me be a little bit more productive. right? And so you're just kind of building on days. And by the time you've been there a handful of days, you get to day 3, day 4. Hopefully you've covered enough ground and have seen enough stuff where you can start to go, all right, on this piece, I think I have figured out where I need to be and what is happening on this piece. And so now you're, might have took you 3 days, but now you should be in a place that wasn't far off from where you were whenever you had your original plan. It's a different plan, but you should have close to the same data.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Unless you're running cameras and all that data went out the window, then it's a different story. But I typically, whenever I'm traveling like that, it's like I'm not running cameras usually, and I'm just relying on showing up, and rolling my shit out and hitting the dirt and then figuring it out as I go. And that's typically the way I like to do it. So
I tell you, those type of hunts are the hunts that reinvigorate me, though.
Oh yeah.
Like, I think about pieces of property that I hunted for years, and I think about like the first couple times I hunted them, and like that unknown factor, and like, I don't know, that shit still charges me up. And that's like a big reason I went to hunting mostly public land this year. Is it was like every day was a field trip. Every day was a scout trip. Like, and I'll just say straight up, like I fucked myself this year by not putting more time into the right areas at the right time. Like, I may go to a spot and I see the sign I want to see and it's fresh. And I said, and if I didn't see the deer I wanted, I was going somewhere else the next day, which just because I wanted to learn and catalog a lot of this. But when I'm seeing that sign that fresh, I mean, I should have given it at least a little bit more opportunity for the right deer to show up. But it was just like, I don't know. It's like, well, didn't see it here, on to the next. And it was almost every day I was somewhere different. I mean, hardly at all did I hunt the same tree this year.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's weird, man, because I'm the same way as you. I know we've talked about this even offline, just in when we run into each other and stuff like that. It's, in PA, I tend to hunt aggressively, but a little bit, what I would say is subdued aggressiveness, right? So it's like I'm hunting different spots pretty much every set. I don't have very many places where I'll set up more than maybe twice during the season. I still move a lot, but I will give a spot when I find hot sign, I will sit it for the duration, right? So it's like if I walk in, say I have a spot I want to set up in the morning, and I'm in there, before daybreak because I've scouted and I kind of have a sense of where I want to be, and I walk in, I hunt that to maybe 10 o'clock, and then I get down and I start scouting, and then say I find hot sign by like 12 or whatever. But I will set up and hunt that the rest of the evening or whatever, until dark. And if that sign was really good, it's like I might wait for the next best wind day to come back and hunt that yet again if that sign was really fresh and like the things were set up to where I'm like, all right, this wasn't a one-off. This is something that's going to be, if it's a scrape or whatever the case is, it's going to be tended over and over. I might come back and hunt it again. Where, when I went to Iowa, and Pennsylvania has a lot of pressure too. So it's like, I'm trying not to, it's what I'll say is it's not a target rich environment. I might know from running trail cameras on this one piece, I might have like a deer that I'm willing to kill. Right.
Yeah.
So when I go somewhere like Iowa, like I was at this year, I have a target rich environment. So I'm not too worried about finding a caliber of deer that I want to kill. I'm more interested in being in the right place that's going to be the hottest versus sitting somewhere where I think that a good deer could come by. And what I mean by that is I might change trees 3 times in a day. You know what I mean?
Yep.
It's like, I'll put it this way. It's like I was in Iowa for 15 days, and in 15 days I had 11 tree setups and 1 ground setup. So I had 12 setups in 15 days. And
you're running the saddle this year, right?
Yeah. So I ran a saddle. I hunted exclusively out of a tethered setup for the past 2 years. And just before that, I was hunting out of mobile tree stands. I was using lone wolf assault tree stands and stuff like that, which were great. But once I switched to a saddle, there just wasn't really any going back because the way I was able to my mobility the past 2 years has been through the roof. And I really think, and I've had the best encounters that I've ever had, pretty much in my life bow hunting the past 2 years, and had the best shot opportunities because I was able to get into the trees, some trees that I wouldn't have been able to get into in a stand. But even more so, it's like I wasn't afraid to move because like I don't have a lot of stuff. Like it's just not
Doesn't
that
take
heavy.
the time. Yeah, I know
It's
exactly what you mean.
I mean, and look, I'm not, I like to be mobile and I like to hunt aggressive, and I'm usually a guy that's not afraid to work. You know what I mean? But like, I'm not gonna lie, like there are times whenever I was in a tree with, with a tree stand, and and
You're
so on
not
and so
feeling the
forth.
spot, but you say, fuck it, I'm just going to sit till this evening because by the
I'm gonna
time I
ride-
get down, the sweat,
Yep.
the noise, reset, and everything, I might as
Yep.
well just stay here.
Yep. And
Yep.
and the other part of it too is like now it's like the way I kind of go in, one of the things I'm really kind of adding to my repertoire this year is ground hunting. Like, I'm friendly. Like, I text back and forth at times with Zach Farrenball from the Hunting Public because I think his ground game is just on point. And so I had him on my show a couple of times and we've talked about it, and we've talked about it offline. And I just, I'm a big football nerd. And one of the things I love about football, I love defensive football first and foremost. I'm a diehard Steeler fan.
Yeah, yeah.
And and so with that, when our defenses were the best, it's like they were always very multiple, right? And I have a lot of respect for the Ravens defense just because they're very amoeba-like and very multiple, and like you never really know what they're in. They're kind of, no matter what formation you're running and no matter what kind of defense they're in, they've always got the right personnel that they can pretty much play any type of defense they need to play against your personnel.
That's why
right?
10 years ago, the Ravens versus Steeler games where the scores were like 6-3 because it was just defensive tactic, like chess matches. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's kind of how I, like the past 2 years, I started thinking about it more and more. And I've been more strategic about just like how I approach my hunt. And what I started running into was, in scouting or just hunting with a saddle, being way more mobile and just like putting way more, ground under my feet during the course of a season than I typically would have in the past. Like where it's like, all the guys who I know who kill big deer and kill big deer consistently that I have a lot of respect for, like they have a couple things in common. And one was like, they're always super detailed, right? Anything that happens, they always ask the question, why? Like they don't ever leave a stone unturned. They keep notes about their hunting setups. And the other thing is that they scout more than they hunt religiously. It's like for every day that they do a full day sit, I'm just saying full day because they might not sit in the same spot full day, but they're probably scouting 3 to maybe 4 days for every full day that they sit.
I know some killers that you were speaking directly about when you say that. Yes, I do know what you mean. Scout hard, hunt easy, Yeah.
And so like, I always knew that, but I was always afraid to fully implement it. So like over the past, like, I don't know, like let's say 10 years, it's like I've started kind of like implementing it like slowly. Right. And then I finally just got to like the past 2 years to where I was like, look, I'm not having near the number of encounters that I want to have. And I can either start pounding the ground and worry less about bumping deer and move more often, learn more, and have better high percentage sits because I'll know more about the area that I'm going to hunt, or I found the sign that's hot to hunt over, than I would if I was sticking to like a game plan that I had planned out in the off season or whatever, and hunted like strategic spots or whatever. And I was like, the only thing I have to lose is that I'm going to have probably the same amount of opportunities that I had hunting the way that I was hunting before, which is like, whatever. It's like, I don't have a whole lot to lose.
Yeah.
So the past 2 years, I really started I was like, you know what? I'm throwing caution to the wind and I'm just going to start moving. I stopped caring about bumping deer. I stopped, worrying about how much I'm hunting, I need to be in a tree. It's like, look, there were days where I kept walking and I ended up walking right back out the woods at dark and never got into a setup.
Absolutely. I did the same exact thing there. And there was, I can think of more than one day that I walked through a chunk of woods and then it was getting dark, and instead of setting up, I was like, you know what? I'm walking back to see where I bumped deer in this twilight. Because then I got an idea of where they were coming from and where they were headed. But it was just like, there was nothing there to make me want to spend the time to hunt. So I used it to scout. I did a lot of scouting this year. A lot of that mobility was due to the saddle. I think I may be coming out with my own saddle. It may have to just happen.
Nice.
I've talked to a couple people about it, and yeah, I may have to make something happen.
Nice.
But
The one thing that the saddle let me do though was like now adding the ground game in is that like I started getting into places where, just from doing as much scouting as I was doing, where I was finding spots where I was like, man, there's a good deer sign here. But there was like not a tree to get into, like not a tree,
even with a saddle. Yep.
Yeah. It was like, the one place was in, where I was seeing places like this when I was in Pennsylvania, but I could always manage to kind of find a tree, but it wasn't really like the right spot to be in, but it was like as close as I could get or to this place I really wanted to be. You know what I mean? Like where you're like, I made it work. You know what I mean? And like I was either gonna get one shot opportunity or I was gonna be completely smoked in that spot. You know what I mean? So when I went to Iowa, I ended up hunting like this CRP, field that had this hedgerow in it because I was trying to actually get to like the other side of this. Like it was like 3 CRP fields with like a couple different draws in it they had to go through. And I got to like the top of the second CRP field, getting ready to go down through another draw. So I was trying to get to the timber line over on the other side because there was some ag that was kind of connected by this huge piece of timber. And I figured that was probably going to be a decent travel corridor for rut to set up on. And so as I was going through, I was getting ready to go down to this hedgerow in this draw. And I just stopped and I started glassing because I was like, man, this would be a classic place to see a buck bedded in this draw, in this brush, So I glassed, I didn't see anything. Leaned down to pick my pack up off the ground, took 2 steps and just heard like hooves hitting the ground, man, just boom. But it sounded like a horse. And I looked and I saw the biggest body deer I ever seen running like just a helen across this CRP field. And from my eye, like I won't put like inches on it, but he was definitely over Boone and Crockett. Won't say how many inches I think he was, but he was definitely over 100. He was definitely Boone and Crockett for
Gotcha.
sure. And I bumped him out of that draw, and I was like, man, this is like I knew that was a perfect setup, right? I was like, I called it, and that's why I was glassing. I just never saw him. There were a couple fatal mistakes I made, but I ended up hunting that deer from the ground the next day. And my buddy was like, why didn't you continue to hunt that deer? Because it was, a hammer deer. I was like, because I felt like I would have been hunting a ghost for almost 2 weeks. It was like, because I'm just not confident in my ground setup, and like to kill that deer, you're probably almost going to have to kill him from the ground.
That's why he's still alive.
Yeah. And I was like, and I'm just not confident in being able to get the job done. I was like, so I'd rather just go hunt places, find other setups where I'm comfortable and have confidence that I can get the job done. I was like, because I just feel like here, I feel like I'm just going to screw it up, like hunting off the ground. And so I abandoned that spot.
It's funny. I had so many encounters young, hunting or just being in the woods and whatever, on the ground. Mm-hmm. And when I was in college and I started hunting, at first I didn't have a stand and I would borrow a buddy sometimes, but a lot of times I was hunting from the ground. And mm-hmm. I personally, I don't understand why people don't do it more often. The only reason that I don't do it more often is because when you're trying to self-film and then you go to the ground, you've just multiplied something that's already super difficult by 10. Mostly because you got to have the camera up high enough to see stuff, but you low enough to be behind shit or whatever. So it's like, It's really tough to self-film from the ground. But if it wasn't for filming, I would hunt from the ground way more often.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so effective.
I totally get it, man. And what I had found, like, so after I had that experience, I killed my deer in Iowa and I came back home and I hunted some late season. I didn't get to get out as much as I wanted to. But I did there was a couple of days that I got out and I was scouting for a setup and just didn't find anything. So I just ended up walking the whole afternoon or whatever and walking back to the truck at dark. And what I ended up finding were like a couple of like really good ground setups around here. And that's when I started thinking to myself, I was like, in a high pressure state like Pennsylvania, right? Or you could use this for Michigan, places in Wisconsin, Maryland, like wherever that, anywhere basically it's not the prime big buck Midwest states where the pressure just isn't quite as great. I was like, these deer are all looking for a place to hide, right? I was like, what better place to hide than in an area where there's not a tree for anyone to get into? That's thick, right?
That's why I was saying why that buck was still alive, is he was probably tend in those areas, like you said, where there's just simply not a tree, even for a saddle.
Right. And so to come full circle, I had hunted that property in October over a primary scrape area that opened up against next to a bunch of side cover in this like little oak grove. And I hunted that when I found that hot sign, and like the only shooter on that property that I had on camera, and this piece is that big a piece of public ground in PA. He was probably close to, he was Pope and Young, probably 9 point. Just he was a decent PA 9 point. You know what I mean? Like decent, good deer for the area. And he popped out, and I got dark deered. I couldn't see my pin, so I couldn't get a shot at him. He was like 15 yards away from me. And where he came out from like this swamp that kind of is adjacent to this piece of public, where half the swamp's on the public, half the swamp is on some private. And so during the late season, I went back there and scouted because I kind of thought I knew where he had come from, which is why I scouted that area in the fall to hunt it, because I knew that would probably be the one area, because it's the furthest away from all the access, where I was like, if I'm a buck of any maturity and I live on this property, I'm living over there by that swamp, because that's going to be the place where he gets the least amount of pressure. And that's where he came from. So I went and kind of investigated it during late season, and I found like 2 killer pinch point setups with both areas that are oak trees, white oaks are dropping acorns in that spot. And they were all rotted for late season. So I didn't hunt it because they were all rotted. But I was like, man, if I could time that right in the fall, these spots would be dynamite. And there's like that one oak tree, but it's not the tree you want to be in to shoot, to kill. Where you actually want to be is on the ground next to this big rock, kind of brushed in, because they're going to walk probably like 5 yards in front of you. Have to. Because they're going to be pinched between that rock, that boulder face, and the adjacent swamp. And it's the only opening to kind of get from one place to the next.
And they walk past it every day.
Oh, man. And
you know what I mean? When you have a pinch like that and you have a big rock face or a factor, like, I mean, that they just walk past it every day. They get lazy about looking at it and everything else.
Yep.
And yeah.
Yeah. So that was the thing where I was like, okay, you know, that I was like, I need to be able to hunt from the ground now proficiently, because I feel like I'm going to have a lot better setups if I can scout in somewhere with my ghillie jacket on and my saddle on. And then when I get to where I find hot sign, make the assessment. Do I hunt it from the ground or do I hunt it from a tree? Whatever's going to give me the best opportunity. So that way
you're going to be for the most part. So like we said, adaptable and ready. If you know the tree you're going to, you know the spot you're going to, you'll probably take one or the other, but you're going to carry something like a ghillie suit and your saddle. Yeah.
It's just a ghillie jacket. You know what I mean?
Gotcha.
Like it's just a jacket, no pants. You know what I mean? I mean, I'll wear pants, maybe not. I might just wear a tee back or something if I'm feeling like I want to get freaky. No,
some assless chaps up in there too.
Yeah, exactly.
No, it's funny you said though, because I actually just recently purchased and put together a ghillie hood.
Nice.
And it's basically just enough to break up my shoulders and head and, drape down maybe over your backpack or something just a little bit. But basically it's just like your shoulders and your neck and your head. And what I did was I put flexible wire through the hood so it stays out in like a frame. Mm-hmm. And really what I did it more for is photography. Because I can be in it, and because it has that kind of little cage frame around me of light wire, I can turn my head inside of it without it moving.
Right.
And I can just kind of have, something draped over my camera too. And it's nice and light. And, I'll probably take it with me turkey hunting, because I'm already going to have shit in a bag and I can wear it or use it as a blind, or if I'm hunting from the ground, throw it over top of my bag. It's just, it's tiny. It's not even a jacket though. It's kind of just like a hood and a shoulder piece. But it's kind of funny. I just put something together for filming. So it's all bright green and shit right now, trying to get some badass pictures of these geese that are starting to nest.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, I had thought about going that route. It was just something for my shoulders. I originally I wanted to just make something myself. And I was like, man, I just don't have the time to make it. That
you do now, bitch. No,
I know. This is before all this happened. My wife was like, she's like, seriously, she's like, I do not want to hear you complain about making this stupid jacket for the next 2 months to just buy one. And I was like, that's fair, because that's exactly what would happen. That is exactly what would happen. But so I picked one up. It wasn't too terrible. I mean, it was somewhat pricey, but it's just like anything with gear. It's like I like to buy what I want, and that I'm going to use.
Yep.
Rather than buying it multiple times.
Especially hunting, because if you're not confident in what you have, I mean, you're just wasting countless hours.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, it's like when I looked at making one, it was like by the time I bought like the jute, or in the thread, and or the burlap, and like found the jacket that I wanted. That was the hardest part. It's like I was trying to figure out what jacket I wanted. I wanted a mesh jacket, because I don't want it to be too hot.
Yep.
Because I want to be able to wear it early season.
Yep.
Because I also,
and you just don't want to add bulk and weight for if you're using the stand or whatever. Yeah.
Right.
For sure.
Well, because I was possibly, one of the places I was kicking around going this year for early season was North Dakota. I was like, you can get some hot days in like end of August in North Dakota. It's like, and I really didn't, North Dakota, it's like, there's a good chance you're going to be hunting from the ground in North Dakota.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
A lot of open land, not a whole lot of trees.
Right.
And then even if you do find trees, do you find a good one to get in?
Right. And so I was like, wanting to do that. And then, eventually I want to make my way to Kentucky and Kansas and stuff like that, for early season, or Kentucky, I'd like to go for rut. But, so I was just kind of thinking about like, okay, I need something that's mesh and light. And I just could not find a jacket that I liked, that I could make a ghillie suit out of, that I felt that I would want to wear during early season. And so there was one company called Rancho Safari that actually their jackets have a mesh jacket. It's a mesh jacket with like your ghillie stuff on top of it. So it's not heavy. And I mean, they're still warm because you get all that burlap and jute on you, but
yeah.
It's still not, it's as cool as it can possibly be for a ghillie suit.
I'll have to plug in a little bit of the footage in this of me making mine, because I did take some footage while doing it. Most ghillie suits have a lot of jute and shit in them. Like mine, I didn't use a whole lot. And then what I did is I literally just took it out on the farm and threw it down on the mud and walked all over it. And then I threw it in the bean field and walked all over it and threw it in the cornfield. Yep. So now, and what I also do is I took you can buy spools of like twist tie wire. And so I bought a long spool of green twist tie wire. And before I tied any jute in, I went through that whole fucking thing and tied green twist tie loops to it. So all over it, you can just grab whatever branches or grasses or whatever you're at and attach shit to it. And that's what I more built it for, is I built it for just a small, and it's mesh. Like you were saying, it's just a real lightweight mesh, a little bit of jute on it to break it up, and then it's going to be mostly the natural foliage that I'm using.
Right.
Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah. Nice. But so I'm looking forward to using that this year. I had to do I'm not quite done customizing it yet, because it's not made for
bow hunting.
Right. And so it's like I'm trimming off the inside of the arm, the left arm, and like the left side of my chest and stuff like that. But I don't want to trim too much, because I still want all that breakup. But I'm just trying to get everything out of the way that's going to hit my string.
Yeah.
So I had my daughter out in the yard with me. I would shoot my bow, really close to the target. That way I wouldn't send one flying into the neighbor's house or anything like that. Until like it stopped slapping the jute or whatever. I'm like, okay, cut this piece off, cut this piece off, cut this piece off, and had her out there helping me manicure the jacket. It's in pretty good shape now, though. I got it trimmed out pretty good. I think I got to trim it just a little bit more, but I was flinging them successfully with that jacket on from like 35 yards. So for the first day wearing it, so that was pretty good.
I dig it. Hell yeah. That's what I figure. I probably will use it for turkey just because it's so fucking easy. But yeah, I did it more for photography. I'm having a lot of fun with taking photos and shit. And one of your buddies I was talking to a good bit, Johnny Utah. He's a fucking monster behind the lens.
For sure.
Yeah, he's just got a really good visual eye, as well as knows how to use the equipment to capture it. And I've always had a lot of fun in photography too, and it's like, well, I can't really shoot nothing right now, so I'm gonna go snap some shots. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that's kind of what I put it together for. If I got the right opportunity, yeah, I'll probably end up using it deer hunting at some point. Just because I find all that shit fun too.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's just, even if it depends. What's your goal? If your goal is to just simply kill a deer, or if your goal is to target this one big specific buck, then, you know, you should probably have a stand and know more and this and that. But if you just want to get out and have fun and have some close encounters and just like, I mean, that's the way to do it, because you can go around, you're having more fun. But like anything else, when you start adding other things like film equipment, well, chances are you're going to get busted a little bit more now. You know, if you start trying to close the distance real tight into them on the ground, yeah, there's chances you might get busted more, but it's fucking fun.
That was just it, man. It's like I was watching, you know, and like I said, I had Zach on the show and I was talking to him about it, picking his brain about hunting from the ground. And it's just that whole idea of like, you know, he had a good phrase that I kind of like took and was like somewhat, you know, became my hunting from the ground mantra and just my mobile hunting kind of slogan. And he was like, you should always start without a destination in mind. That way it's like you're completely free and open to like whatever is going to come across your path that could be the place where you need to be, and you need to be available or have the opportunity to hunt it, whatever the setup is.
That is a good mindset. Yeah.
Right. And so that I've just kind of adopted that. And I had Jared Scheffler on, and those dudes from Whitetail Adrenaline are just bananas, man. And I'm watching them hunt from the ground, film it, you know, and just doing crazy stuff, man. And I'm like, you know, I really want to go to Kansas.
Super aggressive. I mean, when you say crazy, they get super aggressive. And I mean, the one thing that you don't see is really how many countless hours they are in that van driving around before they get those opportunities. I mean, sometimes it's days. You know, you're watching the videos and it looks like, you know, every day they're jumping out and chasing a buck, and, you know, it ain't quite like that. But I love what they do. Some people give them shit for the way they pressure deer and everything, but dude, I think it's fucking awesome. Get out there, get after it. Like,
dude, whenever you're killing, you know, like 140 inch, 150 inch deer or better
consistently
with a freaking stick bow on the ground with no ghillie anything, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
it's with a camera guy. It's like, get out of here, man.
It's consistently, nuts, you know? they haven't done it once. It's, you know, they haven't done it twice. It's like, it's like fucking badass. Like, I dig
I don't know.
Shit.
They've been doing it like 13 years or something like that. You know what I mean? It is an unorthodox way to do it. Cause I mean, when you say they're aggressive, I mean, they are hyper aggressive. They will find a deer in a CRP field in Kansas somewhere, and they will look at a map and be like, where can we go intercept them? And they will take off running.
Yeah, I think it's fucking awesome. Yeah.
The adjacent field. The other thing I added too, because I'm doing some ground stuff, we went and scouted a piece of undisclosed property.
Boom, boom.
Yeah. I don't want to give away too much, but there's a piece of undisclosed property that me and some buddies scouted in a different state other than PA. That there is one particular setup that I'm super jazzed about, and it's a ground setup, but I really probably would need a decoy for it. And there's already like there's two, like, it's a primary scrape area. There's like 3 scrapes already there right next to each other. You know, trees that are like the size of like your thumb, maybe just a little bit bigger, that are snapped off. You know what I mean? Just like
aggression.
Hammers.
Yeah, you can tell that's aggressive. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I'm like, man, this is the perfect setup, and it's this little opening inside of this clear cut area, and so it's not hard to get to, but like people would walk by it and just overlook it if they walked in there. And this place is so like out in the middle of nowhere. It's such a big piece of public land, like we're talking tens of thousands of acres, that I mean, you don't really see other people when you're there, and it's just rough, nasty, rugged terrain. So most people don't want to hunt it. But the age structure deer there, right? Just to give you an example, we pulled 3 cameras while we were there, because we've run cameras there for several years. We pulled 3 cameras. One of them like took a shit. I think someone stole the SD card out of that one. There were 2 that had images on it, and out of those 2 cameras, there were no less than 3 deer that are going to for sure that were this year were Boone and Crockett, and there were 2 if they make the right jump that will be also Boone and Crockett next year. So there's 5 potential Boone and Crockett deer on those 2 cameras, of which no less than 2 of them, possibly a third, will be 180 inches or better. And one of them already was this year. One of them was getting close to the 2 hundo, kind of to that range.
Make sure you keep that location undisclosed.
it will remain undisclosed. There's a ground setup that I'm just like, man, this is just like money. And I was like, if I had a decoy, I was like, this would be the spot to use a decoy. I was like, because it's just, I can tuck back into the edge of this clear cut, and it's just in a ghillie jacket and be completely invisible. And there's really only one wind. I mean, if it was, I guess it would be, I need a west-ish wind, some type of west wind in there. Any type of west wind would work. If I got an east wind, I could probably make that work too, any type of east, but I'd have to get in a tree on the other side, and my shot opportunities would be more limited than coming into that scrape or coming into a decoy. But that'd be a situation where I could probably use a decoy to pull them out where I need them. But it would also be a further shot. Like literally from the ground, it's going to be no more than like 10 yards tops.
Gotcha. And well, I mean, in a lot of times, it depending on how your setup is, use the decoy as a focal point. Like if you're at a pinch, instead of putting your decoy in the pinch, you set it out so they're coming through the pinch and looking beyond, and attention is away from you. You know what I mean? You can use it as a distracting factor, not necessarily a direct lure. I want you to come right to this spot.
Right. Yeah. Cause I've been playing this particular setup, through my mind over and over again, trying to figure out where exactly I would place the decoy and where I would set up at, because, exactly what you're saying. It's like, I really don't want the decoy to draw him in necessarily. I mean, it'd be great if it does that. What I really want him to do though, is I want him to keep his vision in that direction so I can get drawn.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Kind of like elk hunting. You have a call. You have a caller staged behind the hunter. So as that elk is approaching, his focus is beyond where that hunter is staged for him. You're not at that same point. You're drawing their focus past, and they're almost sometimes careless as how they pass by you because they're thinking more about what they're about to approach versus what they're actually passing at that time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But, so that's the plan for that setup, man. And it's just like, there's probably, this place is an interesting spot to hunt because, there's not a lot of deer there, but like I said, the age structure is right. You might go several days without seeing a deer, which isn't abnormal in that spot. In certain areas just turn on. Like we've run cameras there year round, and when we pulled those cameras, those cameras sat there from, we're talking like June through, when was it that we pulled it? It was like late February, like February 22nd or something like that. And it's just like they run these ridge tops, and the ridge tops are really skinny, and they lay down scrapes in these areas. But most of that ridgetop activity is nighttime activity. Your daytime activity is actually on the benches, but the benches are a bitch to hunt because you always get squirrely winds on benches. Like you're better off hunting up top because you just get a more consistent wind. And of course they'll know that. That's why they run those benches.
That's why they're there.
Yeah. But it's really weird because it's not like there's not a place where it's like, man, there's deer here all year round. It's like literally like the one spot there was a deer that came through is probably about 180 inches, and there was another one that came through that was about 160, and then there was another one that was probably in like the 50s. And they'll all should make a jump this year and be really, really good deer next year. But all that activity literally was from October 28th through November 14th. That was it. Maybe a 9 point that would get shot in Pennsylvania that was probably like 120, 125 inches, like came through a couple different times, like earlier in October and then in December or whatever, right? Now, for one day, one of the shooters showed up during the second rut in December, like during like the second cycle in, like right after Thanksgiving sometime.
Just
I want to
by
almost say,
scouring everywhere trying to find
yeah,
one still available.
yeah, I want to say it was probably, if memory serves, for some reason the 17th of December sticks out in my mind that he was making another loop through. And there's a scrape there. There's a primary scrape that there's like 2 or 3 scrapes like in that general area, and that's where the camera was at, and they were hitting that with the licking branch or whatever. But it's really weird. Like when you looking on the map, like you wouldn't notice it until you scout it and you find it. But it's actually where like these two benches kind of come together. But like those benches aren't identifiable on the topo, like on X. Like you would never even go there to look. Like we know that it's there only because
you've put boots on the ground. Yeah.
Well, that my buddy who has hunted there for like 6 years, like they actually shot 174-inch deer in that general area like 4 years ago that ran down over that side of the mountain, and they went down to find him, and that was the only reason they found that kind of general area, was because they were looking for that deer. Because
That's
it's such a steep drop, like you would never want to walk down there just to go scout it.
I mean,
like on
deer that are trying to get away, they can lead you to good deer areas.
yeah, for sure. And so it's just a really kind of unique area. And so the one spot that was really, really good there, where there's like the one mega giant deer, that spot had deer there all year round from through the summer, October. The one mega giant deer, I mean, I'm not even joking. Like we're talking right now and I'm in my bedroom, like just kind of sitting in my bed. I got a king size bed, right? The scrape that was there was as big as my bed.
No shit.
It was, yeah. I mean, it's giant to where that one day, I forget what day it was. It was like, it was mid-November. I don't remember the exact, for some reason the 11th sticks out in my mind, but he showed up at like 9:30, 10:30 in the morning and stayed there till 10:30 at night and fought every deer that came to that scrape.
No shit.
Every single one. Yeah, we have it on camera, like him just fighting off every buck that came in. And he beds in that scrape. There were days where he would just lay down and bed in it. And he would be there a couple times a week, like through that scrape. Now, we found some beds like up on this other ridge. I don't think they were his. They weren't nearly big enough to be his because that's a big deer. But that's the only spot in that whole like tens of thousands of acres that's there. And like we probably only ever spent time on like 6,000 of it, 7,000 of it. You know what I mean? Like just in not every single area, but just like we've kind of learned over time like where to kind of go, and especially my buddy because he's hunted it for years. You just kind of follow the clear cut.
Check
like
the hottest spots and then move on.
Yeah, there's a couple good areas like that particular spot, which is like this really cool bench area that, again, like you don't see it on topo. The only way you see it is by walking down there. And in that spot, like he found just by scouting or whatever and scouring the area. But like basically when we go there to scout, it's like we look at the forestry map and see what areas have been clear cut in the past year and how old the clear cuts are. And we just start going in the areas that we're familiar with. We go to those new clear cuts, and every year we'll try to add like 1 or 2, 3 more ridges onto it where there's been clear cuts that are at the right age. Because usually we want to be around stuff that's like anywhere from like new to like 3-ish years old. After like that, we'll probably start not paying as much attention to them because it becomes
too
not
thick.
As well. That and it's not as the food starts to grow up to where it's not as close to the ground as it once was. So it doesn't quite hold as many deer and stuff like that.
That's when the trees start to shade out the undergrowth, which that is a lot of, that's what the clear cut brings them to, is that fresh new green growth.
Yeah. And so there's one spot that we scouted this past trip that there was a brand new clear cut. I mean, just done like this fall probably or winter. And it's just, it probably won't be great this year. It'll be decent, probably early spring green up will probably be pretty good for it. When fall hits, it won't be grown up enough to where there'll be enough cover there when fall hits. But I was like, man, 2 years from now, that thing is going to be dynamite. I was like, so there's that spot. And then the place where I have those pictures of those good deer that I'll be hunting and where those two benches kind of come together. I looked at the clear cut plan and like they're supposed to this winter, yet they might even be doing it now, supposed to cut like right across the ridge. It's maybe as the crow flies, not even a quarter of a mile away, which would just make that like little that little bench crossing there, like a hot spot to get from one side of the ridge to the next to get over to that clear cut. So I'm hoping they do that because that'll be decent for this year yet, even if they do it this late.
I tell you one thing that's helped me, and I'm gonna bring up a specific example. But one of the things that's really helped me break down the big properties into the bigger picture is OnX.
Oh yeah. 100%.
I mean, nothing can replace getting in there and, like you said, finding those microchasms that are holding deer and the super fresh sign and all. But the particular example I wanted to speak of, I went to a piece of public had never been to, and this was in the off season, so it's thick, it's green, it's well, actually, I scouted it about this time, so it was just starting to get thick and get green, before summer. And I went in there 3 separate times just because of how big this piece was. I couldn't cover it all at once. So I went in it 3 separate times. And when I zoomed back out and looked at the entire property and the marks that I had made, as if I didn't look at them as separate trips, I had mapped out like a fucking mile and a quarter long rub line that goes from this one massive bedding area on the public that I'm pretty sure it seems to only hold does, because they seem like they're the only ones that deal with the pressure of this public land with the walking trails and everything. And it seems like once the rut comes, the bucks know they're there and they just, they can't fucking help themselves but show up there. But it seems like for the most part, bucks don't stay there. They're just not going to tolerate that type of pressure.
Right.
But I noticed looking at all 3 of these trips together and looking at the rubs from all 3 of them, like, holy shit, I can see where there's this massive bedding and all this on this private land and this ag, and then I can see exactly where it's like a mile and a quarter long rub line that comes down and cuts through the public here, up around this bedding area, and then out to that ag. And it seeing that made me realize, okay, this is where they're coming from. That's where it's going on, because I couldn't find fucking fresh buck sign anywhere. And I was like, hey, there's got to be bucks. I mean, there's deer here. And it was actually funny the way I looked at it like that and then went into this area. I picked out a tree. It ended up having a bow hanger in it. And I was talking to a buddy of mine and I said, look, I'm not trying to find your spots, whatever. I said, I've just, it was in September. I called and said, I'm thinking about hunting this area. I know you've hunted this property for like 15 years. I said, I just want to know, can I physically walk into here, or is it going to be so dense that I'm just not going to be able to get into it? And we ended up bullshitting for a while and everything. And I told him about that tree. He's like, dude, that's my tree. Yeah, he's like, that's my bow hanger. He's like, I've killed 7 good bucks out of that tree. He said, now it took him 10 years to narrow it down. Right. Now, with the use of OnX and GPS and be able to track and everything, I was able to look at this massive picture and then break it right down to, I mean, bow hunting comes down to the perfect 20 yards.
Yeah.
I don't care if you have 1 acre or if you got 100,000 acres. If you have that perfect 20 yards where deer want to come through, you got a good hunting spot.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I mean, it's interesting because, it's probably really just been like the past, like, I don't know, 2, like maybe 3 years where it's like I really, started focusing on hunting clear cuts specifically. And part of the reason is just because, hunting public or whatever, it's really kind of, it can be your North Star to a degree, like that in topography, right? But the place, I mean, where I live in PA, you don't get a lot of that like Western PA style mountains where it's like, it's a lot of like huge like boulder fields and stuff like that when you get into the mountains, any type of elevation ground around here, it seems like. and so I hunt clear cuts a little bit differently depending on where I'm at. So like when I'm in the place that's undisclosed, I will hunt more so the edges of them because that's typically where we're seeing, sign being laid down. That's typically where we're finding, scrapes, rubs. It's also where we're seeing deer move. It's also where we've had cameras that has kind of told us that that's where deer are spending time and or moving, traveling through. Whenever it's Pennsylvania, and this is also given it's an area that's not getting a whole lot of pressure just by the nature of the terrain itself, how rugged it is and nasty it is, and people don't want to hunt it because it's not an easy hunt and low deer density. So people don't want to go spend days and not see a deer, so they, not interested.
It ain't easy out here.
Right. And then whenever I hunt them in Pennsylvania, and this has kind of been something that I've kind of stumbled on this year, is, the first, I guess, official scout of the off season that I did, I went out with our mutual buddy, Greg Lissinger, the bow hunting team. He lives close to me in Jersey.
Gotcha.
And he swung over and was like, "Hey, you want to scout this weekend?" And I was like, "Sure." And I've never had a chance to scout with him, and I wanted to just because everyone scouts and does things differently. You know what I mean? It's like I like to scout with different people because I like to see what they pick up on and see if there's something that I'm missing or the things they pay attention to that I overlook or whatever. Same thing when I scout with my buddy Chad Silvestri. It's like I like to scout with him, because he has a different way of looking at things.
For sure.
And so
New perspectives.
Greg and I went out and we were scouting this piece of PA public, and we were focusing on clear cuts because most of the ground, the one side of the property, it was like 3,000 acres, something like that, and the western side I'd already scouted the previous year and it sucked. And so I was like, I want to scout the eastern side of it. And so there was a body of water there, so we spent some time around the lake and found a hammer rub, which made sense, around that lake. I assumed there would probably be, some buck sign around that. Probably
following the edge.
Yep, probably an early season setup. It's most likely what we would, what I would use it for. There was an island out there that they might be bedded on, so I need to get a kayak yet this year and paddle out and check out some of those small little islands out there, see if they're making it out there to bed. But we made our way up onto the mountain into the clear cut, and we just kind of dove into one. We started walking, and I'm talking like these clear cuts, like I was saying before, these are old clear cuts that don't really have any nutritional value any longer for deer. It's so dense, you can't really even hardly walk into it. It's just like a bunch of small saplings as tight together as you could possibly grow. You know what I mean? And so made our way through, and then all of a sudden it just kind of opened up, and we found two-way rub lines for like the whole edge of that mountain, the whole side of that mountain. It's just completely destroyed. Every tree. And when I say every tree, I'm talking like every single tree. And what we basically figured out is that this is really like a rut cycle, a rut circuit that they're running, during pre-rut and rut to try to scent check those, because based on the wind and the thermals, they'll be able to scent check high if they're in the evening when the thermals pull down, or in the morning, whenever the thermals pull up, they can check below them because there's private down below, right? And it's just all nasty. It's all been clear cut, and that's not quite as grown up as the stuff that we were walking through down on the private. It's a little bit more classic briary kind of doe bedding kind of area. And so we just found hammer sign. And so
that's funny. That's pretty much exactly what I was describing. A bunch of thicket, thorn doe bedding area, but you could see where that rut sign and cycle and lane was. Yep. Same exact situation almost.
At some places it was only 3 feet wide, and it opened up just like 3 feet, 4 feet to where you could walk through, and it was all just like grass, right? It turned into like this swamp grass. It was a little bit wet, you know what I mean? It was the side of a mountain, but it just leveled out enough that it would hold water, you know what I mean? Enough to where trees wouldn't grow there, And so we got through that and marked some spots, and I was like, man, I'm definitely going to come back to hunt this. I was like, because it's slamming, and there's no human sign in there. Like nobody has been in there. No one in their right mind would walk in there. You know what I mean? So we walked to the top of the mountain to this other clear cut. We just kind of jumped into the middle of it and said, let's just start walking. You walk 20 yards over there. I'll walk 20 yards this way, and we'll just parallel it until we hit something, right? Some type of sign or whatever. We started walking, and we hit this like low spot at the top of the mountain where water was gathering. It turned into this like mountaintop swamp. And again, rubs, scrapes, just like torn up. And I was like, man, no one in their right mind would walk in here either. Like, this is completely devoid of human. And then we found a dead head. It's always a good sign when deer run somewhere to die.
Yep,
right? It's
we were talking about that earlier. A hurt deer can take you to a real good safe area.
Right. And so like, I was like, okay, cool. Like, so I just kind of marked it, and I was just referring to those spots as like mountaintop swamp, because I'd never, this might be common for someone, but for me, it's like I'd never seen that before. You know what I mean? And so I went out, whatever it was, 2 weeks ago, and I was scouting another piece of public, and never been to this place. And actually, I scouted a part of it the weekend prior to that, and it sucked. So I went to the other side of it, and it was, again, probably like 3,500 acres, 3,700 acres, something like that. And so I went to the other side of it this particular weekend and started walking, and was just going to the clear cuts. And then as I'm walking through, there's like an access road, and I'm walking along, and I'm seeing like these clear cuts. I'm trying to figure out where I'm going to jump into, where I feel like bushwhacking my way through. And then what I realized was I was like, every place that I've been to that I've found really good buck sign, has been in these like mountaintop swamps that are in these clear cuts. I was like, well, it requires water for that to happen, right? Because the water makes it so wet that trees don't really grow, but like reeds will grow. There's been cattails like in these mountaintop swamps, and just like it looks like it's a swamp, grass, the whole nine. And I'm like, well, if you need water, I was like, I just need to find where the runoff is, and if I follow the water ingress into the middle of the clear cut, it's going to suck hiking in. I was like, but eventually it should get to a point to where it gets wet enough to where trees can't grow, and that should be where it opens up for travel. And so I just jumped in where I found water running in and followed it as far as I could until it finally opened up, and boom, opened up where it was like swamp grass, very few trees, very briary and brushy. And then all of a sudden, buck bed, rub, just went to the outside of that clear cut, huge primary scrape area, you know what I mean? That was like the size of like a car hood, and I was like, bingo. And so what I had kind of figured out, shouldn't tell my secret, for Pennsylvania, at least in high pressure places, is that everyone wants to hunt the edge of a clear cut. Like, that's not new news. Like, most people know that, right?
Yeah.
It's like, get along the edge of a clear cut. You'll catch bucks cruising to see if they can scent check those in there. You'll find, in high pressure states, you'll find scrapes on the outside of them, but I would venture a guess it's probably equivalent to like a scrape along a cornfield somewhere, where it's probably a nocturnal scrape, right? They're coming out late to check that scrape or whatever. But I was like, if you get inside the clear cut, I was like, nobody's getting in there. Like, nobody. And so if you're willing to get inside of the clear cut and find a place to brush yourself in or hunt from the ground, or maybe there's one lone tree that you can get into that just happens to grow there mysteriously, like those spots to me can be dynamite. And so I started prioritizing, looking at those, and literally, I think I found 3 setups on this new piece of property, and they were all inside the clear cuts in these mountaintop swamps where there's water ingress running through, making a small swampy area. And that swampy area might only be 200 yards long, and it might then dump you out into like the timber, the hardwoods or whatever. But that 200 yards, I bet you is going to be tore up, and I guarantee they're going to travel it.
Well, and
so
I think more and more that I've kind of found over the years, and it's funny, a buddy put this in perspective. I found more and more over the years that it seems like the bigger deer bed closer to water. And
there's one thing Dan Enfalt told me. We were doing a podcast, and he didn't say it to me. It wasn't like, Clint, I'm going to give you a piece of advice. He was just talking about like how he thinks about things, and he said, and this sticks with me, kind of like how Zach said, start without a destination in mind. That's one thing I always remember. And then the other one from Dan is big bucks like wet feet. And so I kind of always think about that, whenever I'm looking at places like, and it's not like big bucks like to have wet feet. It's just that wet ground water is typically
keeps other people out and everything else, but
100%.
Yeah. But it was funny. A guy I was talking to, the way he equates, he's like, look at me. He's like, I'm he's like, I'm getting fat. I'm getting old. I feel fucking lazy. My knees hurt.
Mm-hmm.
I want to get up, get a drink, get a snack, sit the fuck back down. He's like, I don't want to be walking all over the goddamn place. He's like, what? Why do you think a buck's going to? He's like, they're fat, old, lazy, and they got arthritis in their knees too. He's like, they want to they want to get up, they want to eat, they want to get a little drink, and they want to lay the fuck down. It's like, you're totally right. Like it makes sense. They're going to do, especially in those summer months, they're doing as little as possible, and the same as those winter months. And I tell you, that is something that I didn't really think about to key in on, and I probably wouldn't have if it wasn't for my buddy Ryan Davis in Ohio. It got so cold out there at one point that even the streams and the creeks and everything were freezing over. Well, the only place where these deer were getting water is where it was literally springs coming out of the hillsides.
Yep.
Where it's coming directly out of the ground. And it's like, well, shit, that's something you can key in on at that specific time of the year. If you know something like that pushes that desperate cause, you know what I mean? Same as summer. If it's a drought, those little tiny springs, they're still going to be holding a little bit of water, even if most of the creeks are drying up. You get to the source of it.
Yep, 100%. Yeah, man. So that was kind of my scouting for this off season so far, was just those couple things. My goal was to try to get a couple new pieces of public under my belt, of places where I might want to check out. And I probably have on those two pieces, I probably have I probably have like 5 to 6 really solid areas. I don't call them setups because what I'll do whenever the season rolls in is I'll get the right wind for one of them, and I'll just go take a walk, and hit it and see if the sign's there. If it is, I'll set up. If not, then I'll keep moving, to the next spot. But, there's 5 to 6 potential areas of interest that I just need to validate this next coming year. I need to get some cameras in there. I need to see when it's active. That's the part that I don't know right now is, when is it going to be active? I feel like that one spot's definitely rut. All the other ones are going to be around that pre-rut time frame just because there's scrapes, there's rubs. But I don't know exactly at what point, right? Is it, is it end of October is when it's really hot? I don't know,
And that's where, taking this all the way back to the very beginning, what you said, it's like, you have an idea, but it's not until you get in there and you see this is what's happening right now, right here. Like you really break down what you've already scouted. I think I'm going to get fucking silly with it this year. I was talking to Cody recently, and I think I may run one of the new DeQuisto. I think, what is it, the 1.5 or 0.5, that teeny tiny little motherfucker. I might run that along with my saddle. So,
really,
dude, it's a pound heavier than the platform I'm using already. It's an actual stand, so it's got a seat. And I tell you, there was more than once where it went both ways. There was several times where it was I couldn't hunt here without a saddle. I wouldn't be in this tree if I had only a tree stand. There's also times where it was like, man, if I had a fucking stand, that's the spot. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that new DeQuisto stand, it's so small and so light. It's big enough to use as a stand, but small enough to use as a saddle platform. So and the way it works is a frame pack. I mean, it's like, fuck, I don't know. People are going to think I'm fucking stupid and silly for it, but I think people already do anyway, and it don't faze me. So I'm just going to do what works. You know what I mean? And I honestly, like you said, you're going in prepared for, well, I don't know if I'm going to be on the ground or if I'm going to be in a stand. Same. I don't know if it's going to be a stand, if it's going to be this, but for carrying a pound heavier than what my platform is, fuck it. Make it a stand. Nice. I just want to take shit a different way. I guess I do that with everything. That's how this fucking podcast originated. You know what I mean? And I don't know that I ever told you this. I think I may have intentionally not told you this just so I could bring it up on a podcast. But a podcast you did actually was a big influence on how I'm doing mine now.
Oh,
You were on
interesting.
another podcast, and I'm just going to say it. You were talking hunting and shit, and I don't remember a fucking thing you were talking about as far as the hunting went. But you were talking about a bar fight with your band right before you were about to get signed with a record deal and that getting thrown out the fucking window. And then you were talking about fucking Snoop Dogg on a fucking cruise ship in Dubai or some crazy shit. And it's like, fuck. Like, I mean, even though it was a hunting podcast, like, dude, that was the kind of shit that a lot of what I remembered and took away. And that's kind of, that really was like, man, if I do a podcast, like, I don't want it to be stuck on hunting. Like, sure, I love hunting, and it's like something I do and I'm obsessed with. And most of my friends are hunters and everything too. But it's like that podcast, and then also when I did your podcast, Truth from the Stand. Yeah, we did bring that up. Truth from the Stand, which is your podcast. When I did that episode with you, we were talking about skateboarding and you know, filming, just all kinds of other shit. And so I think I intentionally held that information back all this time so I could let you know on air on a podcast that that was actually a big influence of where I wanted to take KiLLs it.
Nice, man. Well, I'm glad I could inadvertently help. But I don't know, man. I've been lucky, I guess, you know, in some sense, that I've got to do some cool stuff, you know, and that was, you know, some of it was crazy. You know, it's like I kind of almost lived a completely other life prior to the one that I have now, you know.
Dude, I say the same shit. I used to be a wild man myself.
Yeah. It was just, you know, I grew up hunting, you know, I don't even think we covered that, but it's like I grew up hunting. I grew up in a rural Pennsylvania family and, you know, grew up in South Central Pennsylvania, not far north of the Mason-Dixon line. Actually, I think, you know, the Mason-Dixon is probably maybe 30 minutes from where I grew up.
No shit. I grew up just above the Mason-Dixon line. You ever hear of a place called the Susquehanna Trails?
Yeah, I have.
Really?
Like I grew up at, I grew up just a little bit north of like Hagerstown, Maryland.
Okay. Yeah.
So,
Allentown area, is that? Or is that a little further west?
That's a little further east and a little further north.
Okay.
I actually grew up in a town called Bedford, or actually Breezewood was closer to where I grew up, so it's right off Interstate 70.
Oh, 70. Yep. Yeah, right off 70. Yeah. I went to school in Frostburg, so I used to drive right past and through there all the time. Yeah. Dude, it's funny. So back when I lived in the Susquehanna Trails, it was the trails. Like, there wasn't paved roads. We didn't have a trash service. We didn't get a mail service. A lot of my neighbors didn't have electricity or running water. Like, we were in the fucking trails, bro.
Yeah. Well,
it's kind of funny to think about it now, looking back at all that shit.
Right. It's like I always tell people, I'm like, you know, I didn't have like a real address. Like our address was,
same.
I didn't have a house number. My address was Rural Route 2. You know what I mean? Like that was literally the address of.
We were the A-frame before you went down the hill.
That's exactly it, man. You know,
right?
We didn't have cable where I lived. We had an antenna all my life until my dad finally got like a dish whenever I was probably like 17. But at that point, it's like I was so used to not having like regular TV at my house. It's like I was never inside anyway. You know what I mean? It's like I was always out in the woods because we owned a little. You know, my grandfather that was, you know, lived close by down by the river below us. He had a horse farm. And so he had a bunch of land, and then my uncle lived like right by us too. And he had some land, and my dad had 30 acres. And so it was like, I always just had room to roam, you know, and like, you don't think about it whenever you're a kid, but like looking back on it now, it's like, man, how lucky was I to like, I would come home after school, you know, and I'd throw down my backpack or whatever. And it might be the fall, because I didn't start bow hunting until I was in my 30s. So it's like during the fall, you know, I would come home after school, and you know, if I wasn't playing football, I'd, you know, come home, throw my pack down, and I'd grab a shotgun and be like, hey, Dad, I'm going out and going to do some hunting, or whatever. I'd go out and small game hunt or turkey hunt, fall turkey hunt or whatever, you know, and that was just what I did. I'd wake up Saturday morning and go out and hunt or whatever. It's like I didn't have to even think about it. It never was like a thing you had to plan to do. Just like you just went and did it, you know. And so I was just always outside. And then, whenever I got a little older, went off to school or whatever, and I quit college the first time, so I wanted to be a musician. And I moved to Orlando and started playing in, a rock band. And, we got first
start
got
partying
signed.
and you're not getting up for the early mornings and
for me, it's like, yeah, I
oh, believe me, I know it all too well too.
yeah. I had my fair share of fun, but I was really, I'm this way with anything, and that's like I'm the same way with deer hunting. It's like when I get into something, if it's something I'm passionate about, it's like I'm all in. And I know you're the same way.
Yep, absolutely.
So for me, it's like music was just like was the only thing whenever I was growing up that I ever wanted to do, that I ever could think about long term, like that I could think about spending the rest of my life doing. And so I went after it with everything I had, and so that meant I gave up a lot of time hunting and stuff like that. Like I didn't hunt for years because every waking hour I had a recording studio in my house, and a friend of mine owned a studio that I worked at. And so when I wasn't playing, I was in the studio at my house, or I was at my friend's studio because I'd produce records and I'd engineer records. A couple of buddies of mine owned venues. And so whenever I wasn't doing those things, I'd be booking bands that we were on tour with. I'd book them to come through Orlando at different venues and stuff like that. And so it's like I was just involved in music 24/7, and that's just the way it is with anything that you want to be good at. Like you just have to be willing to do, especially it's funny because people always ask like, hey, people will actually think at times that like my podcasts are like, they'll ask me if I work a real job. And I'm like, oh my God, yes.
I get
like,
asked that all if I post a video of me at work, people are like, oh, you have a real job? I'm like, what the fuck? You think I just act like a retard on the internet all day and go hunting?
Right.
Like what? Like, come on. Yeah, I got a real job. What do you think pays for this shit?
Right. People, I'm sure some people understand. I don't want to say people don't understand, but anything that is what I like to call a passion career, so like music or working in hunting or whatever the case is, it's one, you don't get paid a lot. That's just like the net.
Or at all for a long time.
Because there is a person just like you on the next phone line or around the corner willing to do what someone just asked you to do for less than you're willing to do it for.
Yep.
And that's just the way it is. It's the same thing.
And someone
music.
That's already started right before you and is a step ahead. Yep.
Right. And so, and I knew that just like when I got into music, I was like, I knew that. I knew if I was going to make it, if I was going to have any opportunity to do things I wanted to do, and my goals weren't lofty. I wasn't like, I don't want to be like the next Mick Jagger. I don't necessarily need to be the next Rolling Stone. Like when I was 15 years old, I wrote down one of my teachers because she was, I wasn't a problem student necessarily, but she would just recognize that like I had more to give than I was given, you know what I mean? Type of thing.
You weren't being challenged.
Right. And so she sat me down one day and she's like, what do you want to do? And she was great. I mean, she's since passed. She passed from cancer several years ago. I stayed in touch with her up until, a couple years before she passed away. But she sat me down and said, what do you want to do? Like, what are the things you want to do? And so, I was like, I want to make a record. I want to have a record deal. I want to produce records and I want to tour. Like those are my four things, right? Never once did I mention money. Never once did I mention I wanted to be famous. Never once did I mention that I needed to have people like, think that I'm the best thing since sliced bread. Like those were not the things. They were like very functional things I wanted to do. When it came down to it, I wanted to create things. I wanted to make stuff.
100% cool. Create an experience.
Yeah. And,
Yep.
And so basically with that, like she challenged me, by asking me those questions. It made me take a hard look at like, what are the things I really want to do? And so I was like 15 at the time, I think. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I was like 15. And I ended up accomplishing all of them by the time I was 22. Like I'd gotten signed, I had toured, I'd made records, I'd produced a record, and once I got to that point, I was like, I can actually do this. I just need to be willing to work hard, and put the time in that other people aren't willing to put in. And so I didn't hunt for probably close to I took one hunting trip to Alaska and didn't hunt for probably like 9 years because every waking moment I was I had a guitar or an instrument in my hand, or I was in a studio.
You know,
And that was just it.
I just read something, you know, stupid little quote somewhere that some chick probably stole from Pinterest and put under her picture, but it said, if you get home from a day's work and you don't work on yourself or what you want, it's not because you're tired, it's because you're uninspired.
Yep.
And that's the truth.
Man.
Like you said, you're not going to get paid money. All these passion careers. I mean, the reason that I started filming and doing anything, well, one, I always loved filming because of skateboarding. We filmed skating and made videos. So that's where that passion of it came in. But really the whole idea and all behind it was like, man, I was a broke kid, but I loved hunting. Loved it. Like, and out of college, didn't have a lot of money or anything else. And it was like, I just want to hunt every day. I want to travel around and hunt. And it's like, okay, well, how am I going to afford the equipment? How am I going to afford going to these places and all this shit and work and everything else? And I was like, well, I guess I'm going to have to find a way to make that my work. Right. And that's basically literally what I've tried to do. And from there on out, I've just made the worst business decisions, really, because I'm still not getting fucking paid, even though I've had, I don't know how many people over the years offer me various sponsorships and things like that. And it's like, yeah, there's a lot of people I do partnerships with and everything else. And I'm not trying to be like that, whatever. But it's like, yeah, I'm still not making fucking money at it. And now this podcast, why am I doing this? I'm not making any money from it. I don't have any sponsors for it. It's just simply a passion and something I enjoy doing. And, you know, the more podcasts I did, I've actually had, a local guy that I'm now friends with found out about me from your podcast.
Oh, nice.
You know what I mean? Yeah. And he
cool.
And he hit me up and was like, hey man, I hear you're in Maryland and, I need some help breaking down a property. And I was like, well, send me a map, this and that. And we started talking, and his job site was right down the road from me. And I was like, shit, dude, come on by. So he came by and I, you know, helped him out. And he got a good buck on a couple good bucks on camera. And his cousin shot a really good one. And, you know, it was just cool, but there's the power of the podcast. So someone else found about me from a podcast that, like I said, wasn't even my own. It was yours. It was a cool way to connect. And, I'm just having fun doing it. And, enough people keep telling me that they want to hear what I have to say. So I guess I'll just keep talking shit, you know?
Right.
It's like,
I'm the same way, man. Like, you know, it was, you know, to bring it full circle, when I left Orlando, I just at one point got kind of done with music. You know, I had ridden the wave for as long as I possibly could. And just truth be told, I was burned out. You know, it's like you can only, you know, I ran hard for, you know, whatever it was, 8-9 years of, you know, just put everything else on the back burner, you know, and just got to the point to where, you know, you get to a point to where you have to decide whether you
got to take a breath.
Well, that or is the juice worth the squeeze? You know what I mean? And in saying that, it was really, you know, what I really wanted out of life was changing. I was getting older, you know, and what I really was valuing was changing. And it was really, really hard at that point where I was at. At that point, the band that I had built, we had gotten a record deal. We went to LA, we made a record, came home, we got into a fight with our record label. We sued our record label, got out of our deal. We were going to have to go re-record the record, but we were getting ready to leave for tour. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I was like, you know, it was disorganized chaos to a degree. I was like, you know, this isn't worth it for me anymore. Like, I'm
didn't
spending
have
so
the
much
fun
time.
allure to balance it out the way it did in the beginning.
Right. I was like, you know, this, like, I'm no longer a musician. Like, I'm an asset. You know what I mean? I was like, and that wasn't what I wanted. You know what I mean? I was like, I don't want to deal with the business stuff. If I want to work in business, like, I want to go make money. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
because right now we're making enough to get by, as a band and stuff like that. But like, if I'm gonna have to deal with this kind of crap, then I'd rather just go work in the business world and get paid. It's like, so, and it got to the point to where it's like, my wife and I wanted to have a family, and I wanted to be home and didn't want to be on the road and doing all that kind of stuff. I did have an opportunity that popped up to play with a very large band that asked me to potentially play guitar for them. I went and played with them for a couple of days. Just kind of checked it out, but their timing wasn't going to work because they were getting ready. Their newest record was getting ready to come out, and my wife and I were getting ready to have our daughter, and so it just wasn't going to be a good situation necessarily. I mean, in hindsight, financially, it probably would have been a good idea because they've sold several million records and won a Grammy, and, and all that stuff. But yeah, but it is what it is. Like, things always work out for a certain reason, and so
Right.
I left music entirely, and my wife, I went back to school, finished my degree while we were living in Orlando, and we knew we wanted to move because we wanted to move. We had our daughter, and we wanted to move somewhere where either two things were important to us. One, being somewhere that had a better education system than Florida does, for our daughter's sake, and somewhere where we could enjoy the outdoors again, because I don't like the outdoors of Florida because I'm not a beach guy. I didn't like the heat,
Gotcha.
don't like the hot, right? So it just didn't appeal to me.
And the bugs.
So
And everything trying to bite you.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to be somewhere where either close to the mountains or into the mountains, right? Was the idea. And if we could have it both ways, we'd like to be close-ish to family, so our daughter could grow up knowing her grandparents.
Word.
And so we were actually on our way to Colorado because I had a job opportunity out there in Boulder, and then I ended up taking a gig around Philadelphia just because it would be closer to our family and stuff like that for our daughter and so forth. So that's how we ended up here. And the reason why I wanted to move back to where there was mountains and outdoors and stuff like that was because it was like, when I left music, it was so weird. Like, I stopped playing music, and all of a sudden I started reading hunting magazines online. Like, I immediately went, it was
tried to reconnect to the outside.
Yeah. It was just I was like, I need the outdoors back in my life again in a significant way. You know what I mean? I was like, and so it's just I just kind of fell back into it. Like, I never skipped a beat. And then started going back, to our hometown and started hunting with my father-in-law the first year we were back. So my dad since had moved to the Carolinas, so it wasn't really an option to hunt with him while I was living here. And started hunting there. And then one of the old timers that my father-in-law hunts with is a big time bow hunter. And we started talking about it, and one thing led to another. And so I was like, I want to try it. Cause I never bow hunted growing up. My dad did some, but he never took me with him bow hunting because he mainly would still hunt, and I always tell people, I'm like, I only hunted from the ground all my life. I never got into an elevated hunting situation until I was in my 30s.
Right.
Ever.
Okay.
I still hunted or hunted from the ground.
I did mostly until, my, I guess, early 20s.
Yeah, it was early 30s. It was probably 31, I think, 30. Yeah, 30, 31 when I first started bow hunting. And that was the first time I started getting into an elevated setup or whatever.
Well, it's funny you say, you immediately had that calling to get hunting back into your life. And one of the things that I really respect that you do is the way you've taken some of your personal time in life to give back to hunting, not just through your podcasts and sharing stories and awareness and information, but through Skull Brew.
Yeah.
And I wanted to touch on that a minute. I know Skull Brew is, I guess, kind of shut down with the quarantine shit right now, right?
Yeah. It's I mean, right now we're not able to roast or do anything, because just we're all non-essential business.
But for people that don't know, just give a little a quick overview of what Skull Brew is, because I'm a fan of the coffee, and as I said, I really respect what you're doing with this too. So I wanted to make sure I mention this.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the Skull Brew Coffee Company is something that my wife and I came up with. To start to give back more to conservation. The idea really was, I started doing a little bit of writing for some outdoor magazines and stuff like that, some nonprofit conservation, membership magazines, and, donate, and I'm a member and pay my dues and stuff like that every year with, BHA, QDMA and RMEF and stuff like that. And, one of the things that, as I was working with the podcast and doing stuff in the outdoor space, it just became more and more obvious to me that, that it meant more to me to give back. Like I started getting to, I don't know if it happens with age or whatever, but I became less concerned with like my own successes, achievements, or recognition, and more so concerned with like how we're treating some of these natural resources and what's going to be left for other people like my daughter and her kids and whatever, for them to explore and enjoy. And I wanted to be able to give back more, but you can only do so much with your paycheck, and you have a mortgage and car payments and all those things. And so I was like, I need to figure out a way to give back on a continual basis. And I was like, well, I work in marketing and advertising and have some business acumen. I was like, so maybe I start a business that part of like the whole business model is that it gives back a portion of its profits to conservation. And so I started thinking about it. My wife and I really like coffee, and we ended up finding some great people to partner with that own a roastery that is close to us, that have the same kind of feelings about the outdoors. And so we ended up partnering with them for them to help us kind of do our roasting while we learned the business. And we started Skull Blue Coffee Company, and we donate 10% of all of our profits back to nonprofit conservation organizations. So, when you go online, you go to skullbrewcoffee.com and you select whatever roast that you want.
And it's fucking killer coffee. I've had two of the different roasts. I had the medium and I had a dark, and they were both banging.
Nice. Thanks, man. Yeah. So when you go on to buy, when you go to checkout, it'll ask you, a drop-down menu will appear, and you'll be able to select who you want to donate to. And right now we donate to just a couple different organizations. So one is QDMA, one is RMEF, one is Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. And then we wanted one because part of the other thing we want to do is that conservation isn't just important for hunters, it's also important for non-hunters and the non-consumptive users, if you will.
100%.
And so we also donate to the Nature Conservancy. And so we try to find places that are hunting friendly, if they're not pro-hunting per se. And so that's why we chose the Nature Conservancy. Because the long-term goal, this is a pie in the sky goal, is that, I can potentially, hopefully one day use that business as a platform to create dialogue between hunters and non-hunters, and the importance of conservation that both of our groups have in common, as, a way to unify and have a common goal to work together.
That's awesome, so because that really is awesome, because you think about it now, most non-hunters don't realize how much hunter dollars go into saving the lands, and not even just the animals, but even the state parks and their walking trails and everything else, how much hunter dollars go to that. So dude, that's fucking awesome. Like I said, I've always had a big respect for that, and I'm definitely going to have to get myself more once that comes back online. Who knows when that's going to be, but when you guys can get back online, I'm definitely going to get myself some. And that's one thing through this podcast. I will figure out a way to do something to give back more, because a lot of these things are important to me, and that's what the secretive service shout out and stuff like that I do with this. Like I have guys thank me for that, and it's like it to me it's so little, but to know that it's appreciated and recognized, that's why I did it in the first place, was for them. But I really do want to figure out a way to expand and give back as well. And dude, I just think it's, you've taken, again, another passion project, coffee, and taken it to, you're not going to earn a whole lot anyway, being into yet another passion product. And then you're taking a piece of that and still giving it back. It's just fucking dope, dude. Speaks a lot to your character and what you're truly about, Yeah,
thanks, man. I appreciate that. The truth of the matter is that, it's been in business now for a year. This past September, we've been in business, and my wife and I have yet to take a dollar from it. And many times we put money into it to do something new, or to go to another event, or whatever the case is. I mean, essentially, it donates the money and it pays for itself essentially at this point. And that's really where we're at. We're not trying to figure out how to say this. we don't. We want to let the business do what it's going to do. We don't have necessarily we have to do X by the fifth year.
You're not all in on it either. Like
right.
It's
one of those things where, I would like for it to grow over time, and again, like the pie in the sky idea would be that, like, hey, one day maybe that would be my job and that would be awesome. And if it is, that means I'm able to donate a lot more money to conservation, which would be killer. And
hopefully this podcast helps reach out to a couple more people that, I mean, most people are drinking coffee and most people are buying a box or a bag or a cup of coffee that doesn't do anything but put some warm coffee in their belly. So, hopefully more and more people recognize that and, hopefully sales pick up in a little bit once COVID-19 lets us get back.
I know, right? Yeah, exactly. Once it releases us from its grips.
Right.
Yep.
Well, dude, we're getting about 2 hours in. I'm not sure, normally I'd really be careful about taking people away from their time, their wife and their daughter evenings at home, but you've had enough time. You might be ready to scream and enjoyed me pulling you away for a little bit.
I will say it's been a nice reprieve.
Right. Well, dude, it's always good talking to you. It was good seeing you at Harrisburg again. A lot of the trade shows got closed, so I didn't get to see you at the others. But yeah, man, I appreciate you coming on here for sure.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. I look forward to seeing you again. We got to get together one of these days in person once it's socially acceptable.
No doubt. You got to come down and kill some fish with us, man.
Let me know, man. Once we're all clear, I will do that.
Yeah, teach you some new shit.
I'm down.
All right, man. Well, with that, y'all, this has been another episode of the KiLLs podcast. Like I said, this one socially distant. He's on the other side of the Mason-Dixon. I'm down here in Maryland doing my thing. And again, a guy I have a lot of respect for between his podcast, what he's done to give back. Very creative. And we laid down the truth here with the man, Clint Campbell, Truth from the Stand. And you want to check him out, you can find him on Instagram, all the social media, all that good shit, Truth from the Stand, and then, of course, the Skull Brew. Pick up some coffee that gives back. Not just makes you feel good, but does some good shit. Thanks, buddy.
Thanks,
KiLLs it.
But the brain builds a catalog, right? And I think it's referred to as a schema. And it's basically a filing system that you use, and that's how your brain makes sense of everything. That's why whenever you see a picture, it recalls something right away for you because it makes a connection, right? And so for something like this, like a pandemic that doesn't have like defined edges, right? It's kind of an amoeba, right? It's always kind of moving and shifting, and so it's hard for us to kind of understand like what is happening because we're looking for definitive answers, definitive concrete things that we can go, okay, I can make sense of this.